Sometimes, the loudest applause comes from the same people who once told you that you'd never deserve a stage. My name is Grace, and for most of my life, I was the invisible one, the quiet daughter, the overlooked sister, the girl my own family said education would be wasted on. But the day the dean shook my hand and called me our youngest donor, I realized something powerful. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like fire or fury, it looks like calm dignity in a room that once rejected you. It started in a house that smelled of oil, metal, and exhaustion. My father was a mechanic, the kind who believed that if your hands weren't dirty, your life wasn't worth much. My mother was practical, tired, always calculating how to make things stretch. I had 3 brothers, all loud, confident, adored. They fit perfectly into my father's world, grease under their nails, jokes about life being simple as long as you worked hard and never dreamed too high. Then there was me, quiet, bookish, strange. I loved stories. I loved the way they could carry you somewhere else, even for a few minutes. When I read, I wasn't the daughter who failed at house chores or the sister who couldn't fix an engine. I was someone who mattered. But in my house, books were luxuries. And I was foolish for loving them. One evening, while everyone was watching TV, I said softly that I wanted to go to university one day. The silence that followed was thick. Then my father laughed, a low, dismissive laugh that burned through my chest. Education, he said, shaking his head. Grace, people like us don't belong there. You'll quit the moment it gets hard. Don't waste your time, or my money. My brothers joined in, smirking. Professor Waste, one of them said. That name stuck for years. Every time I picked up a book, they'd mock me. Every time I talked about grades, they'd laugh. Even my mother, who should have been my refuge, told me to stop dreaming. Your father's right, she'd say, those dreams will just break your heart. I remember one night vividly. I was 16. I'd worked for months to earn a scholarship form from my teacher. It was my chance, my one shot at getting out. I brought it home, excited, trembling with hope. But before I could even explain what it was, my father snatched the paper from my hands, tore it in half, and threw it on the floor. Dreams don't fill plates, he said coldly. Stop wasting time. I went to my room and cried until the pillowcase was soaked. But somewhere between the tears, a thought formed. If they believed education was a waste on me, I'd make sure one day, they'd eat those words. I didn't know how, but I promised myself that moment that I would never let their voices decide who I was. After that, I started saving secretly. Tutoring neighborhood kids, selling crafts online, skipping bus rides to walk miles so I could keep every coin. Each coin became a symbol of rebellion. Each hour I stayed up studying was my way of saying, you'll see. When I finally got accepted into college with a full scholarship, I didn't tell them. I left before dawn, carrying a small bag, a notebook, and a heart that was terrified but determined. I didn't look back. I took the bus for 6 hours, staring out the window at the city growing closer. I whispered to myself, you're free now. The first months were brutal. College was a different universe. Everyone seemed smarter, richer, and more confident. I had 2 pairs of clothes, a second-hand laptop that barely worked, and a hunger that went beyond food. It was the hunger to prove I belonged. I worked nights cleaning classrooms. Some nights, I'd wipe the same desk where I'd sit for lectures in the morning. My back hurt, my hands cracked from detergent, but quitting was never an option. I'd study during my 15-minute breaks, fighting sleep with cold water splashed on my face. There were times I'd stand outside the dining hall, stomach growling, pretending I wasn't hungry because I couldn't afford food. Some days, I'd wonder if my father was right. Maybe I was chasing something too far from my reach. But every time that thought came, I'd remember the sound of paper tearing in his hands, and that was enough to keep me moving. By the second year, things began to shift. My professors started noticing me. They said I asked good questions, wrote with insight, and spoke like someone who'd lived 1,000 lives. I became the go-to person for tutoring struggling students. I started earning a little money that way, enough to eat properly and pay for books. One day, after class, a professor asked if I'd ever thought about mentoring younger students from underprivileged backgrounds. I laughed and said, I can barely take care of myself. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the kids back home who'd never get a chance like mine. Kids who'd be told the same words I was, education is a waste. So I started small. I rented a corner in the public library every Saturday and taught 10 children basic reading and math. They came barefoot, shy, holding notebooks donated by other students. Those afternoons became my favorite part of the week. Watching their faces light up when they learned something new reminded me why I fought so hard to be here. Soon, the group grew. Word spread. Parents started bringing their kids from neighboring areas. Within a year, there were over 100 children in our weekend sessions. I called it the Grace Foundation, though I never felt comfortable naming it after myself. It wasn't about me, it was about proving that education wasn't a waste on anyone. The local newspaper published a small article about it, calling me the student who teaches. That article changed everything. Sponsors reached out. Other students volunteered. My university gave me an award for community leadership. And for the first time in my life, people looked at me not with pity, but with respect. But back home, there was still silence. No calls, no messages, no sign they even knew. Sometimes I'd sit by the window at night, wondering if they ever talked about me, if they even knew I was making something of myself. Maybe they thought I'd failed and just disappeared. A part of me wanted to go back and show them, but another part whispered, not yet. Not until the time is right. In my final year, I was invited to a major university event, a fundraising gala. The dean himself had seen my work and wanted to honor the foundation I'd built. He said, "We'd like you to attend as one of our youngest donors." I stared at the email for minutes, unable to breathe. Donor. They were calling me a donor. I borrowed a simple navy dress from a friend, tied my hair neatly, and walked into the grand hall that night feeling like an imposter. The chandeliers sparkled, the air was filled with perfume and polite laughter. I stood there quietly, feeling small again, until the dean took the stage. He spoke about courage, persistence, and the power of education. Then he said my name. Grace Parker, he announced, has shown us that education isn't measured by wealth or privilege, but by heart. Tonight, we honor her for giving back more than she was ever given. I walked up, trembling, and shook his hand. Cameras flashed, people applauded, and for the first time, I didn't feel out of place. But then, as I stepped off the stage, I saw them, standing near the back of the hall. My family. My father, my mother, my brothers. My breath caught. My father looked older, smaller, unsure. My mother had tears in her eyes. My brothers shifted uncomfortably, pretending to adjust their ties. I didn't know how they got there. Maybe they'd read about me in the paper. Maybe curiosity brought them. But seeing them there was like seeing ghosts from another life. After the event, they approached me. My father's voice was quiet, almost breaking. "Grace, we came to see for ourselves." I didn't believe it when I heard. His eyes glistened as he said, "You did what I couldn't even imagine." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The years of humiliation, the laughter, the torn scholarship, all of it flashed before me. My mother reached out, touching my arm gently. "We were wrong," she whispered. My brothers stayed silent, staring at the floor. Part of me wanted to cry, another part wanted to walk away. But I didn't feel anger anymore. Just clarity. I looked at my father and said, "It's okay. You couldn't see it then because it wasn't your dream, it was mine." He nodded, eyes wet, and for once, he didn't argue. That night, I went home and looked through old photos. I saw the girl I used to be, the one who studied under dim light, clutching torn papers, and I smiled. She made it. Over the next few years, the foundation grew beyond anything I imagined. We expanded to new towns, opened community learning centers, and sponsored hundreds of children. The same university that once gave me a scholarship now received donations from my foundation. The dean invited me again, this time to unveil a new education center. The plaque read, "Funded by the Grace Foundation." As the curtain dropped and the audience clapped, I looked out and saw my father again, this time sitting in the front row. He wore a suit, his hands clasped, his eyes glistening with pride. After the ceremony, he came to me and said, "You taught me something I never learned. Education isn't a waste. It's the reason we're standing here." I hugged him tightly. It felt like closing a chapter that had haunted me for years. But life had more to teach me. One day, I received an invitation to deliver the commencement speech for the university's graduating class. Standing on that stage, looking at thousands of students, I remembered every struggle, every tear, every night I wanted to quit. And I said to them, "If no one claps for you, clap for yourself. If no one believes in you, believe harder. Because one day, the people who doubted you will be the ones standing to applaud." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. I smiled, not because I'd proved them wrong, but because I'd proved myself right. Later that day, as I was leaving, a young woman stopped me. She said, "My parents told me education was a waste too. But I watched your speech, and now I know it's not." She hugged me, crying. That moment made every pain worth it. Years passed, but I never forgot where I came from. I often visited the same small house where everything began. The cracked walls, the smell of oil, the dinner table where my dreams were once laughed at, it all remained. My brothers were kinder now, more respectful. My father had grown quieter, gentler. And my mother would sometimes watch me with a soft smile that said what words couldn't. She was proud. Sometimes I'd walk into my old room, sit on the bed, and whisper, "You did it." Because in the end, that's all I ever wanted, to prove that education wasn't a waste. If you ask me now what revenge looks like, I'll tell you it's not anger or pride. It's peace. It's walking into a room full of the same people who doubted you, and instead of gloating, you smile, shake hands, and keep moving forward. Revenge isn't about shouting, "Look at me now." It's about standing tall and knowing you became everything they said you couldn't. Grace learned that success is the quietest kind of revenge. It doesn't destroy, it transforms. And the sweetest victory isn't when they finally believe in you, but when you no longer need them to. So if you've ever been told you're not good enough, that your dreams are a waste, remember this story. Remember Grace, the girl who was called a waste but became a donor. Remember that you don't need permission to become who you're meant to be. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't fire, it's light. And the best way to silence those who doubt you is to let your success speak for itself. That's how Grace did it. That's how I hope you'll do it too. I grew up in a house where dreams were treated like something dangerous, like they could break the walls if you believed in them too much. My father was a mechanic, a man who measured worth by how much sweat you gave, not how much you learned. My mother was always tired, always practical, and my brothers were everything he wanted, loud, confident, hands covered in grease, and never asking for more than what they were told they could have. Then there was me, the quiet one, the strange one, the girl who loved books more than anything else. I used to hide under the table with a flashlight, reading while everyone else slept. That little beam of light felt like my only friend in the world. Whenever I tried to talk about studying or university, they'd laugh. My father would shake his head like I had said something ridiculous. "Education is a waste on you," he'd tell me, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through me. "People like us don't belong in those places." My brothers turned it into a joke, calling me Professor Waste. Every time I heard it, I smiled like it didn't hurt, but at night I'd cry into my pillow, trying to understand why the people who were supposed to believe in me couldn't see what I saw. Even my mother would say, "Grace, don't waste your time. You'll only end up disappointed." I wanted to tell her that disappointment had already found me the day she stopped believing. I still remember the night I brought home my scholarship form. My teacher had helped me fill it out, believing in me when no one else did. I sat at the dinner table, my hands shaking as I slid the paper toward my father. I thought maybe this would change everything. Maybe he'd finally see me as more than just the girl who didn't belong in his world. He looked at it for less than a second before tearing it in half. "Dreams don't fill plates," he said, tossing the pieces aside like they were trash. My brothers laughed, my mother stayed silent, and I just sat there pretending the sting in my eyes was nothing. When they went to sleep, I picked up the torn paper from the floor, smoothed it out, and whispered to myself that I'd find a way. That night, something inside me shifted. I realized I could either spend my life waiting for them to believe in me or I could start believing in myself. I started saving every coin I earned, hiding them under my mattress, skipping bus rides so I could walk and keep the money. I studied in secret, read by candlelight, and promised myself I'd prove them wrong. Their voices never left my head, but they stopped hurting me. They started pushing me. Every insult became fuel, every doubt became a reason to keep going. I told myself that one day, I'd make them wish they had never said those words. The morning I left home, I didn't tell anyone. I packed my few clothes into a worn-out bag, tucked the torn scholarship paper between the pages of my notebook, and slipped out before the sun came up. The streets were quiet, and the air smelled like oil and rain. My heart was pounding, but my hands didn't shake. I kept telling myself, "This is it, Grace, this is the moment everything changes." I didn't even have enough money for a proper breakfast, but I had something better, freedom. When the bus pulled away, I looked out the window and watched my neighborhood fade into the distance. I didn't cry. I just kept whispering, "You'll see. One day, they'll see." The university looked nothing like the world I came from. It felt too clean, too big, too bright. Everyone walked like they belonged there, confident and comfortable, while I stood there clutching my bag like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. The first few weeks were the hardest. I worked as a cleaner in the evenings, mopping the same hallways where other students walked without noticing me. I'd study during my lunch breaks, sitting on cold floors with my books open, eating a cheap sandwich if I was lucky. Some nights, I'd stay in the library until it closed, pretending to study even when my stomach hurt from hunger. I didn't want anyone to know I had nowhere else to go. There were times I wanted to give up. When I saw students with new laptops, expensive clothes, and parents who called to check in, I felt invisible. I didn't have anyone to call. No one was waiting to hear how my day went or if I had passed an exam. But instead of breaking me, that loneliness hardened me. Every time I wanted to quit, I'd hear my father's voice in my head saying, "Education is a waste on you." And just like that, I'd pick up my pen again. His voice, their laughter, it became the soundtrack of my fight. I remember one night vividly. I had just finished cleaning a classroom, my hands raw from the cleaning chemicals, when I sat down at a desk and started studying for an exam. My head was heavy, my vision blurry, but I kept going. The next morning, when I got my paper back, it had an A at the top. It wasn't just a grade, it was proof. Proof that I was still standing, still fighting, still building a life out of the pieces they threw away. Money was always short, but I found ways. I tutored other students, skipped meals, shared books, and somehow made it work. I learned that survival wasn't just about food and shelter, it was about holding on to the one thing that gave me meaning. I stopped dreaming of making them proud. I started dreaming of making myself proud. Every day, I walked to class with tired legs and an unbreakable will. Because I knew one thing for sure, if I quit now, their words would win. And I couldn't let that happen. Education didn't just change my life, it changed me. When I first stepped into that campus, I thought I was there to earn a degree, but it turned into something much deeper. It became a mirror that showed me who I could be. The girl who used to hide her books was now standing at the top of her class. My professors started to notice me, calling me, the one who never gives up. I didn't feel special, I just knew what it felt like to have nothing, so I couldn't afford to waste anything, not time, not effort, not a single opportunity. During my second year, I met a little girl outside the university gates selling snacks to students. Her hands were dirty, her clothes worn out, but her eyes were bright. I asked her if she went to school, and she said her parents couldn't afford it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. She reminded me of myself, of all the children who would never even get close to a university gate. I decided to do something, even if it was small. The next weekend, I gathered a few friends, borrowed a small classroom, and started teaching 10 neighborhood kids how to read and write. They sat on the floor, sharing pencils and paper, their laughter echoing through the empty hall. For the first time, I realized education wasn't just my way out, it could be someone else's too. Word spread quickly. More children started showing up. I began reaching out to people, asking for old books, used notebooks, anything we could use. Slowly, that little group grew into something real. I named it, the Grace Foundation, not because I wanted my name on it, but because it was born from the grace I wished someone had shown me. We held classes in parks, libraries, anywhere we could find space. I would work my cleaning shifts at night, study during the day, and teach in between. I was exhausted all the time, but for the first time in my life, exhaustion felt like purpose. One day, a local newspaper wrote a short article about us. University student gives back through education. I didn't even know they had written it until people started stopping me on campus to congratulate me. That small article changed everything. Sponsors reached out, teachers volunteered, and soon we were teaching hundreds of children across different neighborhoods. My professors were proud. The dean himself came to visit one of our weekend sessions and told me, "You've done something most people twice your age haven't." But inside, I still felt like the same girl who once sat in her room clutching torn papers. The difference now was that I wasn't hiding anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to my family or even to myself. Every time I saw a child spell their name for the first time, I felt like I was rewriting my own story. Education had given me more than success, it had given me purpose. And that purpose was stronger than any pain I'd ever known. The day I received the email from the dean's office, I thought it was a mistake. They were inviting me to the university's annual fundraising gala, not as a student volunteer, but as an honored guest, one of the youngest donors to the education program. I stared at the screen for so long that my eyes burned. Donor. That word didn't even feel real. Me, the girl who once cleaned classrooms to survive, was now being invited among the very people who once looked untouchable. I didn't have fancy clothes or confidence for such an event, but I borrowed a simple navy blue dress from a friend, tied my hair neatly, and told myself that if I had come this far, I deserved to stand there too. That night, as I entered the ballroom, I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. The chandeliers sparkled above me, and soft music filled the room. Everyone seemed polished, important, and at ease, while I stood there clutching my invitation, wondering if anyone could see how nervous I was. I took a deep breath and walked in, reminding myself that I wasn't there by accident. I had earned my place, every single bit of it. When the dean began his speech, I stood quietly in the back, half listening, half lost in my own disbelief. Then I heard my name. Grace Parker, he said, is a remarkable young woman who has shown what courage and persistence can achieve. Tonight, we honor her for her contribution to the university and for building a foundation that's changing lives. For a second, I couldn't move. Everyone turned to look at me, clapping, smiling. My legs felt weak as I walked to the stage, but when the dean shook my hand, I felt steady again. Cameras flashed, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being seen. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of quiet satisfaction. As I stepped off the stage, I froze. At the far end of the room, near the entrance, stood my family. My father, my mother, my brothers, all of them. My father's hands were clasped in front of him, my mother's eyes glistened, and my brothers stood awkwardly, unsure what to do. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. I didn't know whether to cry or walk away. After the ceremony ended, they came to me slowly, almost cautiously. My father spoke first, his voice low and unsteady. "Grace," he said, "I saw your name in the paper. I didn't believe it until I came here. You did what I never thought was possible." His eyes were wet, his shoulders no longer proud but humbled. My mother touched my arm softly and whispered, "We were wrong." My brothers stayed silent, guilt written across their faces. I didn't feel anger, just a strange peace. For years, I had dreamed of this moment, but it didn't feel like victory, it felt like release. I smiled and said, "It's okay. You couldn't see it then." My father nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. That night, I didn't go home with bitterness in my heart. I went home with something far better, freedom. Years later, when I look back, I realize my story stopped being about revenge a long time ago. What began as anger slowly turned into peace. The foundation that started with 10 children sitting on a library floor grew into something I could never have imagined. We opened learning centers in small towns, trained teachers, and provided scholarships for students who, like me, had once been told they didn't belong anywhere near a classroom. Every time I saw a child holding a new book or writing their name for the first time, I saw a little version of myself, the girl who once hid torn papers under her pillow and cried in the dark. Education didn't just save me, it gave me a reason to keep moving. One year, I was invited to attend the opening of a new education center funded by the Grace Foundation. When I arrived, there was a large crowd, news reporters, and a plaque covered by a velvet cloth waiting to be unveiled. As I stood there on stage, I saw him, my father, sitting quietly in the front row, wearing a clean shirt and holding a small bouquet of flowers in his lap. I hadn't seen him in months. When the dean announced my name, the audience clapped, and the cloth was lifted to reveal the plaque. It read, "Dedicated to those who were told they couldn't. Funded by the Grace Foundation." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I looked at my father, and he was already wiping his eyes. After the ceremony, he came to me slowly. His voice trembled when he said, "I never understood. I thought education was for other people, not us. I didn't see what it could do. I was wrong." He looked smaller than I remembered, like life had finally humbled him. I didn't feel the anger I used to carry. I just felt calm. I told him, "It's okay. You didn't have to see it back then." I did. He nodded, eyes glistening, and hugged me. It was the first time my father ever held me without criticism or distance. That moment didn't erase the pain, but it softened it. A few years later, I was invited to give the commencement speech at the same university where everything began. Standing on that stage, looking at thousands of students in their graduation gowns, I felt something powerful, a full circle. I told them, if no one claps for you today, clap for yourself. If no one believes in you, believe anyway. Because one day, the people who doubted you will be the ones standing to applaud. The applause that followed was overwhelming. And in the front row, I saw my father again, older now, but clapping with pride. That was the moment I understood what real revenge looks like. It's not about anger or payback. It's about growth, peace, and purpose. The sweetest revenge is living a life that no one ever thought you could. And forgiving the ones who couldn't see it until the end.